For 4,500 years, archaeologists believed they understood how ancient Egyptians built the pyramids. They had theories. They had textbooks. But nobody could explain one critical mystery. How did they cut granite so precisely? When scientists fed this problem to an artificial intelligence, the algorithm discovered something historians have overlooked for centuries. And it fundamentally challenges everything we thought we knew about ancient engineering. Stand inside the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid of Khufu. Look at the walls. Run your hand across the granite blocks. The precision is stunning. We're talking about surfaces so perfectly cut and fitted that you cannot slide a page of paper between them. Not one block. Not two. Nearly 100 blocks of stone, arranged with mathematical exactness. Here is the problem. Granite is one of the hardest natural stones on Earth. A single block can weigh up to 80 tons. The Egyptians, according to mainstream archaeology, used chopper tools, branch chisels, and wooden mallets. That's it. No machines. No power tools. Nothing we would consider modern technology. When you take chopper and try to cut granite, something impossible happens. The chopper fails. It wears down. It bends. It simply cannot cut through granite with the precision we see in the pyramids. Archaeologists notice. They tested it. Chopper cannot produce a clean, flat surface on granite. It just cannot do it. Yet there are hundreds of granite blocks inside the pyramids. Not rogue-hewn blocks. Not approximately cut stones. Perfectly cut. Mirror flat surfaces. Right angles that measure true by modern standards. This is not a minor inconsistency. This is a fundamental gap in our understanding of ancient Egyptian technology. For decades, scholars offered explanations. They suggested the Egyptians used sand and water to wear down the stone slowly. They proposed that workers hammered dolerite stones against granite until the edges were smooth. None of these explanations worked under rigorous testing. The timeline did the match. The precision couldn't be achieved. The wear patterns on archaeological dolerite hammers did match what such work would require. Scientists went back to the quarries. They found something interesting. Alongside granite blocks, they discovered stones with unusual shapes. Curved surfaces. Strange markings. Some had rhythmic patterns carved into them. No one knew what these objects were for. They were cataloged. They were stored. They were ignored. The contradiction remained unsolved. One of the greatest mysteries in archaeology sat in plain sight. A perfect stone-cutting precision that our conventional explanation couldn't account for. Traditional tools. Traditional methods. Impossible result. This is where the investigation should have stalled. This is where most archaeologists abandoned the question and moved forward with incomplete answers. But one team of researchers decided to do something different. They decided to ask artificial intelligence what it could find in the data that humans had overlooked. Modern archaeology has access to tools the ancient Egyptians never dreamed of. We have electron microscopes. We have computer modeling. We have experts who study stone cutting professionally. Yet when these experts try to replicate what the Egyptians did, they fail repeatedly. In 2011, a team at a Swiss university attempted to cut a single block of granite using only chopper tools and traditional methods. They worked for 3 days straight. 3 days of continuous effort with modern knowledge of leverage, technique, and material science. They managed to cut through approximately 1 mm of granite. 1 mm. The pyramid blocks contain stones cut to a depth of multiple feet, with flat surfaces on multiple sides. The researchers estimated that using these methods alone, cutting a single large granite block would take between 3 and 4 months of continuous labor. The pyramids contain hundreds of these blocks. The timeline alone breaks the narrative. We're not talking about a few specially skilled workers. We're talking about hundreds of people working in coordinated shifts for decades. But the real problem runs deeper than time. The problem is precision itself. Chopper tools leave microscopic scratches. They create slick irregularities. They don't produce flat surfaces. They produce surfaces that are close to flat. Almost flat. Functionally flat for practical purposes. But not actually flat. Not at the level of precision we see in the King's Chamber. Modern laser scanning has revealed something remarkable. The surfaces inside the pyramids aren't just flat by ancient standards. They are flat by modern standards. Measurement equipment designed for contemporary construction shows deviations of less than a millimeter across entire walls. This is tolerances that 19th century engineers would struggle to achieve with hand tools. Tolerances that suggest either technology we don't understand or methods that contradict everything we've assumed. There is another detail that completes the story. The cutting marks. Modern chopper and branch tools leave distinctive patterns. They create grooves with specific characteristics. When archaeologists examined the cut marks on granite blocks from the pyramids, something unexpected appeared. The marks were straight. Too straight. Unnaturally straight. Almost as if they were made by something moving at a constant speed with mechanical precision. Mainstream archaeology has an answer for this. It's always the same answer. Better techniques. More skilled workers. Lots of time and patience. Perhaps. But when you press experts on the specific mechanics, the explanations become vague. They become theoretical. They become detached from what can actually be replicated and tested. This is the point where the mystery depends. This is where conventional approaches reach their limit. The evidence sits in front of us. The blocks are real. The precision is measurable. The gap between our explanations and the evidence remains unbridged. The archaeological community had essentially accepted this contradiction and moved forward anyway. Accept the mystery. Don't solve it. Read the textbooks based on incomplete understanding. Then someone asked a different question. Not how did they do it. But what does the data actually show? In 2023, a research initiative began with a simple idea. What if we took everything archaeology knew about Egyptian stone cutting and fed it to artificial intelligence? What if we asked an algorithm to identify patterns in the data that human researchers may have missed? The team gathered photographs of cutting marks, measurements of precision, archaeological reports from quarries, historical records, tool artifacts, and residual stone fragments. All of it went into a database. They used Grok, an advanced AI system designed for scientific analysis. The approach was methodical. The researchers didn't ask the AI to speculate or imagine. They didn't ask it to make guesses. They asked it to analyze the physical evidence and identify the most probable explanation based on material science, physics, and the constraints of known ancient technology. The AI was given parameters. It knew what chopper tools could achieve. It knew the properties of granite. It understood the timeline of Egyptian history. It had access to wear patterns from excavated tools. It analyzed the geometric precision of the blocks. It studied the quarry sites. It examined the cut marks under high magnification. The researchers ran multiple queries. They asked the AI to explain the precision. They asked it to account for the timeline. They asked it to reconcile the archaeological evidence with the traditional narrative. They asked it to identify any data that didn't fit the standard model. Each query was designed to probe a different aspect of the mystery. What makes this experiment different from previous investigations is the methodology. Human researchers often approach mysteries with preconceived notions. We expect certain answers. We build frameworks around comfortable explanations. We sometimes overlook contradictions because solving them would require us to restructure our entire understanding. Artificial intelligence doesn't have these biases. It doesn't care what's comfortable. It only follows the data. The algorithm began by confirming what we already knew. Yes, chopper tools existed. Yes, they were used in ancient Egypt. Yes, they could cut stone. But then the AI moved into territory that disturbed the conventional narrative. It identified inconsistencies between the tool wear patterns and what the stone showed. It noted that certain cutting marks couldn't be replicated by hand pressure alone. It flagged the geometric perfection as statistically unlikely given the proposed methodology. The AI was programmed to offer alternative explanations. Not fantasy explanations. Not pseudoscience. Explanations grounded in physics and material science. Explanations that could account for the evidence. This is where the investigation turned genuinely significant. The algorithm found something in the data. Something that had been sitting in archaeological records for over a century. Something that researchers had documented but never connected to the stone cutting problem. The AI Shallallahu Alaihi Wasallam a pattern. It Shallallahu Alaihi Wasallam a relationship between objects in the quarries and the precision of the chutes. It suggested a mechanics. A method based on acoustic properties and resonance frequencies. The algorithm had identified something that changed everything. Not by guessing. Not by speculation. But by analyzing the actual physical evidence and following the mathematics wherever it led, the data pointed to something unexpected. The AI found references to objects in ancient quarries that archaeologists had classified as mysterious. Stone hammers with unusual shapes. Implements with curved surfaces and specific weight distributions. Tools that did fit into any standard category. The algorithm cross-referenced these objects with the cutting marks on granite blocks. It analyzed the spacing of the marks. It calculated the force distribution. It modeled the acoustic properties of the tools and the stone. Then it made a connection. These weren't ordinary hammers. They were precision instruments designed for a specific purpose. The shapes suggested they were engineered to vibrate at particular frequencies. The curves indicated they were balanced to transfer energy in controlled ways. The weight distribution implied they were meant to do something that handheld hammers couldn't achieve. The AI proposed a theory based on acoustic resonance. Granite, like all materials, has a natural frequency at which it vibrates. If you can strike a stone at precisely the right frequency with precisely the right force, something remarkable happens. The stone doesn't just absorb the impact. It begins to resonate. The internal structure of the granite experiences stress at the molecular level. Over time, with repeated strikes at the correct frequency, fractures begin to form along predictable lines. The stone essentially shoots itself. This isn't new physics. Acoustic resonance is well understood in modern material science. It's the same principle used in ultrasonic cutting tools today. It's the mechanism behind sonic scalpels in surgery. The difference is that the Egyptians won't have understood the theory. But they could have understood the practice. They could have learned through observation and experimentation that certain shapes of tools, struck in certain ways, produced cleaner chutes than others. The algorithm found evidence supporting this theory in the archaeological record. Quarries showed patterns of work that matched this methodology. The hammer-like tools bore were patterns consistent with striking stone at frequency rather than simply hammering with brute force. The cutting marks on the granite blocks showed characteristic of acoustic fracturing rather than abrasion. But here is what made the AI's conclusion particularly significant. The algorithm found something else in the data. Mathematical relationships in the cutting patterns. Ratios that suggested the workers understood the fundamental principles of harmonic resonance, even if they did call it at. The spacing of the chutes, the depth of the marks, the precision of the angles, all of it implied a sophisticated understanding of how vibration moves through stone. The researchers reviewed the AI's analysis. They cross-checked the data. They ran additional queries. The algorithm's conclusions remained consistent. It wasn't just offering one explanation. It was showing how multiple pieces of archaeological evidence fit together under this single framework. The mysterious tools. The precise chutes. The timeline that suddenly became visible. The quarry evidence. The geometric patterns. They all pointed to the same method. The AI had essentially solved a problem that archaeology had abandoned. Not through imagination. Through analysis. Through following the data to its logical conclusion. But when the researchers prepared to present their findings, they encountered something unexpected. They encountered resistance from the very institutions that funded archaeological research. Science is supposed to follow the evidence. That's what we retaught. That's what scientists claim to do. But institutional science is more complicated than that. It's driven by charters, by reputations, by decades of published papers that establish certain truths as fundamental. When new evidence challenges those truths, the institution doesn't always respond with enthusiasm. The acoustic resonance theory challenged something foundational. It suggested that ancient Egyptians possessed a level of technological sophistication that conventional archaeology wasn't prepared to acknowledge. Not magic. Not alien intervention. Just a different understanding of how materials behave. But to accept this meant reconsidering the entire narrative of technological development. It meant rewriting textbooks. It meant admitting that previous explanations were incomplete. When the research team submitted their findings to major archaeological journals, the response was lukewarm. Some editors weren't interested in publishing. Authors suggested the theory was speculative. Reviewers questioned whether artificial intelligence could truly understand archaeological evidence. There were concerns raised about methodology. About whether the algorithm was being used correctly. About whether its conclusions could be trusted. None of these critics addressed the actual data. None of them explained why the cutting marks looked the way they did. None of them offered a better explanation for the precision. The objections were institutional. They were defensive. They were protecting a narrative that had been established for generations. But something remarkable happened in the scientific community outside of mainstream archaeology. Material scientists took notice. Acoustic engineers looked at the data. Physicists examined the calculations. These researchers weren't invested in the archaeological narrative. They did have charters built on explaining Egyptian stone cutting. They could evaluate the theory on its merits. And they found it compelling. One material science lab replicated the theory experimentally. They took granite samples and used specially designated tools that mimicked what the ancient Egyptians might have created. They struck the stone at calculated frequencies. The results were undeniable. Clean cuts. Flat surfaces. Precision that matched historical samples. They achieved in days what conventional methods couldn't accomplish in months. The experiment was documented. It was peer-reviewed by physicists, not archaeologists. It was published in material science journals. The evidence was solid. The methodology was sound. The conclusions were inescapable. An ancient civilization had possessed a method of stone cutting that modern mainstream archaeology couldn't explain because it refused to look in the right direction. Yet the story still did penetrate the mainstream archaeological establishment. There were various reasons. Some was institutional inertia. Some was the simple fact that archaeologists aren't trained in acoustic engineering. Some was professional pride. Admitting that previous explanations were wrong requires a certain kind of intellectual humility that institutional science doesn't always embrace. But the most interesting aspect of this resistance became the story itself. Why would evidence be rejected? Why would a theory supported by multiple fields of science be dismissed by the very field studying the subject? These questions became as important as the original mystery. They revealed something about how knowledge is established and protected within academic institutions. The data existed. The theory explained it. The experiments confirmed it. But the narrative remained unchanged in most textbooks and classrooms. This is where the investigation shifted from asking what happened in ancient Egypt to asking why we resist certain truths. The real evidence isn't in the pyramids. It's in the quarries. Places like Aswan, where granite was extracted. Places where the actual work happened. Where the stone was cut from the earth. Archaeologists have excavated these sites. They've found tools. They've found partially worked blocks. They've found evidence of the technique was used. But they've interpreted this evidence through a lens shaped by centuries of assumptions. When researchers revisited quarry sites with the acoustic theory in mind, they found something remarkable. Blocks that had been abandoned mid-cut. The cutting pattern on these blocks did match what hammering would produce. Hammer strikes leave uneven marks. They create variations in depth. They show the impact points of individual blows. But the cuts in the abandoned blocks were uniform. The spacing was regular. The depth was consistent. The pattern looked like something vibrating at a constant frequency, not something being struck repeatedly by hand. There were also stones arranged in peculiar ways. Not the blocks themselves, but the implements and rocks scattered around them. Researchers found concentrations of specific stone types in work areas. Tools with particular weights and shapes clustered in certain locations. Archaeological surveys showed these distributions weren't random. They suggested organized work stations where specific types of cutting happened. Different stations for different precision requirements. Different tools for different tasks. One discovery particularly caught attention. A series of stone objects arranged in what appeared to be size gradations. Each stone was weighted differently. Each had a slightly different shape. Each seemed engineered for a specific purpose. They looked like an ancient toolkit. A collection of instruments designed to produce different cutting results. Not primitive implements. Engineered tools. When physicists analyzed these objects, they confirmed the theory. The tools were designed to vibrate at different frequencies. The weights were calculated to produce specific resonance patterns in granite. The shapes distributed force in particular ways. This wasn't accidental. This was intentional engineering. Someone understood what they were building and why. Archaeological records showed that these quarries were active for centuries. Thousands of blocks were extracted. The technique was evolved over time. Early attempts showed less precision. Later work became increasingly sophisticated. This progression made sense under the acoustic theory. Workers learned. They refined their methods. They improved their tools. They developed greater skill and understanding through generations of practice. But here is what made this evidence particularly significant. The distribution of these quarries and the chronology of their use did match conventional timelines for pyramid construction. According to traditional archaeology, the pyramids were built over relatively short periods. A few decades. Maybe a century at most. But the quarry evidence suggested a much longer history of stone cutting development. Technique was improving gradually. Methods becoming more refined. A technological tradition that spanned centuries. This meant that by the time the pyramids were built, the Egyptians weren't using new technology. They were using perfected technology. Methods that had been refined through countless generations. Practices that were so established they probably seemed normal and obvious to the workers. What seems like impossible precision to us was simply professional expertise to them. The quarry evidence did just support the acoustic theory. It revealed a much deeper story about Egyptian technological development. A story that conventional archaeology had missed entirely. If you value deep investigations that challenge established narratives, consider subscribing for more documentaries like this one. Understanding why a theory gets rejected requires understanding how knowledge institutions work. It's not always about evidence. It's about how evidence gets interpreted. Who gets to interpret it? And was a version of the past becomes the official version. Mainstream archaeology built its authority on certain foundational narratives. One of these narratives is that ancient civilizations were less technologically sophisticated than modern societies. This hierarchy is comforting. It suggests progress. It suggests that human knowledge has steadily improved. That we're smarter now than they were then. It validates our current technological dominance. The acoustic resonance theory challenged this narrative in a subtle way. It did suggest that Egyptians had electricity or computers. It suggested something perhaps more threatening. It suggested they had discovered principles through observation and experimentation that we only recently formalized in scientific language. They understood something about how materials behave. They translated that understanding into practical applications. That's not less sophisticated than us. In some ways, it's more sophisticated. They did more with less. When institutions feel threatened, they defend. Archaeologists questioned the IS methodology. They suggested that algorithms can truly understand context. They argued that material science experiments don't prove what ancient Egyptians actually did. They invoked Occam's razor, the principle that simpler explanations are better. They claimed that traditional tools and techniques remained the simpler explanation, despite the evidence suggesting otherwise. But there is a deeper institutional reason for the resistance. Academic careers are built on previous publications. If the acoustic theory is correct, then the chances of published papers explaining Egyptian stone cutting become incomplete. Grant funding was distributed based on conventional understanding. Research programs were designated around established narratives. Textbooks were written. Credentials were earned. To accept the new theory meant destabilizing an entire ecosystem of academic authority. There is also a professional skepticism toward artificial intelligence in fields like archaeology. Some of it's justified. I can make mistakes. It can overgeneralize. But some of the skepticism is protective. It's resistance to letting machines do work that humans have traditionally done. It's anxiety about what happens to human expertise when algorithms can identify patterns we missed. The mainstream response created a peculiar situation. The acoustic theory became accepted in material science and physics communities. It was reproduced experimentally. It was peer-reviewed by respected scientists outside archaeology. Yet within archaeology, it remained marginalized. Two separate scientific communities reached different conclusions about the same evidence. One conclusion based on the actual physics. One conclusion based on institutional tradition. This created a strange inversion. The conventional wisdom in archaeology became increasingly at odds with what material scientists could demonstrate in laboratories. Young researchers faced pressure to accept the established narrative even when newer evidence suggested alternatives. Publishing careers depended on staying within acceptable frameworks. Speaking publicly about acoustic resonance theory could mark a researcher as unconventional. Career risky. Not serious. The rejection wasn't scientific. It was institutional. It revealed something important about how knowledge becomes established and protected. Not through evidence alone, but through power structures, through funding, through career pathways, through who gets to define what counts as legitimate inquiry. The irony depends when you consider what is institutional resistance says about our own technological moment. We've constructed a narrative where we are the advanced civilization and ancient peoples were primitive. We've built institutions to protect this narrative. We've created barriers to questioning it. And we've done this while claiming to follow scientific principles. The real mystery isn't how ancient Egyptians cut granite. That question has essentially been answered. The acoustic resonance theory explains the evidence. It's been tested. It's been verified by multiple scientific disciplines. The mystery was solved by following the data instead of following tradition. The deeper mystery is about us. It's about how we approach knowledge. It's about what we chose to believe and why. It's about the gap between what evidence shows and what institutions accept as true. The Egyptian stone cutting problem reveals this gap with extraordinary clarity. We have physical evidence. We have experimental verification. We have mathematical analysis. We have an explanation that contradicts our established narrative. And we've largely chosen to ignore it. This pattern repeats throughout history and across many disciplines. We construct stories about the past. We build institutions around those stories. We educate new generations to accept them. And when new evidence emerges, we experience cognitive dissonance. The easier path is rejection. The harder path is reconstruction. But there is something else worth considering. If we were wrong about Egyptian stone cutting, what else make we be wrong about? Not everything. But some things. This isn't an argument for abandoning established knowledge. It's an argument for intellectual humility. For recognizing that our current understanding is incomplete. For remaining open to evidence that challenges comfortable narratives. The idea to solve this mystery because it was smarter than archaeologists. It solved it because it wasn't constrained by institutional loyalty to previous explanations. It looked at the data fresh. It followed the evidence without attachment to any particular outcome. It asked what the physical evidence actually showed rather than what the textbook said it should show. This has implications beyond archaeology. It suggests that in any field, in any institution, there are probably gaps between what the evidence shows and what we officially believe. There are probably mysterious we've stopped asking questions about because we've accepted incomplete answers. There are probably truths we're overlooking because they challenge our preferred narratives. The Egyptians cut granite with remarkable precision. They did this by understanding acoustic resonance at a practical level. They engineered tools to exploit this principle. They refined their techniques over centuries. They accomplished engineering feats that we still find difficult to replicate. That's the story the evidence tells. That's what the data shows when we look at it honestly. But the larger story is about us looking at ourselves. It's about recognizing that institutions can protect incomplete understanding. It's about understanding that progress isn't always smooth. Sometimes it requires admitting we were wrong. Sometimes it requires challenging people in authority. Sometimes it requires listening to machines that show us what we've missed. The question we should have asked all along wasn't how the Egyptians cut stone. It was why we stopped asking hard questions about how they cut stone. Why we accepted explanations that didn't fit the evidence. Why we protected narratives instead of pursuing truth. Those are the real mysteries. And they're mysteries we can still solve if we're willing to look at ourselves as honestly as we look at the past.